You can learn a lot from business by watching a very, very street smart person that maybe has no formal education, but they know how to read people, they know how to talk to people, they know how to work through situations, they know how to think on their feet. And that's something that's very hard to teach. I think that's a very innate thing. I'm not a huge fan of how the current school systems thing's set up because, again, like you shouldn't also think less of somebody who may want to go be a plumber, an auto mechanic, or this, that, and the other, thinking that, hey, you have to go to a 4-year college to be successful. I don't think that's the right lens to be painted. I think more people are realizing that now. People who are C&D students that aren't good at school because their attention span is somewhere else, like they don't want to learn this stuff. So forcing them to learn it could be more detrimental because then you make them maybe feel less smart than they actually are.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of Trident Coffee. He's a close personal friend, Mr. Eric Johnson. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me. It's great to do it in person.
For real. And since we've talked about it numerous times, I got to say this for you guys too. It's about time. He and I have had so many incredible conversations, and at the conclusion of every single one, we're like, why didn't we press record? And so here we are, finally pressing record. It's official, my man.
Let's do it. Let's get on record.
I'm excited to chat with you today. You've got so many different layers and facets to your story. And here we are at one of your brick and mortar spots, the home of America's finest cold brew. When I throw that out loud, it sounds so real. What does that mean to you?
It's kind of cool. Being from San Diego, being America's finest city, it's kind of an homage to what San Diego's all about. Active lifestyle, craft, and also there's a military component to it as well. So it's definitely really cool to highlight something amazing about your city and promote it to a bunch of people.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And coming off a global pandemic where everybody was spending time in isolation, this word connection seems to be an overarching theme around coffee. And, that's been something that's been a part of your root since the very beginning. When I throw out the word connection, what kind of floats to the surface for you?
Well, I mean, the hardest part of it where you're dealing with the last couple of years of the pandemic is that, people, there's a lot of information being passed out, what you can do, what you can't do, what you shouldn't do, and people were just very confused. And so when you have all that going on, they obviously are stressed. There's a lot of anxiety around the unknown. Luckily, we were able to stay open, and we became this kind of sense of normalcy for them to come in, get their cup of coffee, hopefully see a few people that they know, connect, and then like, okay, I can center around that and kind of get my day going around coming to get my one cup of coffee, and that's what I can control today. Cool, I got that done. And so for us, it's that kind of removing a little bit of that anxiety of, because when you see a familiar face and you connect with somebody it's like, okay, not as scary, not as crazy. And so that's been one thing that was really cool to see over the last 2 years is this tribe that we're building, is people coming in, connecting, saying, hi, how you doing? What's going on with you? What's happening? And they're able to say, okay, everything else is going maybe a little bit crazy, but this is something I can center myself around and kind of focus on what I can control. And that, kind of goes into a lot of the storytelling that we do. And one of my favorite cold brews is about stoicism and just focusing on what you can control, because you don't, it just gets really hectic and very chaotic, and that's not a good place to be trying to make decisions and grow.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys aren't following this guy on Instagram, check him out at Craft Your Legacy. He's always throwing out really awesome quotes around stoicism, but things that are little nuggets that you can take with you. And one of the things to unpack from what you just said, which is control the controllable. And at a time when there was so much out of our control, I love that one of the little nuggets you threw out is this idea of like, hey, you can start your day with us. You can see a familiar face. You can build some momentum to help catapult the rest of your day. And, this element of storytelling and your guys' relationship to health and wellness is a huge reason that I started perking my eyebrows and wanted a gentle peek behind the curtain. Like, what's going on with this Trident brand? Who is Eric Johnson? And now we're here and we get an opportunity to kind of share some of these really cool things with our community. So thank you so much for kind of spending some time with us and sharing, some of the gentle little seeds that were kind of planted early on.
Yeah, of course. It's always great. Like, I remember we got introduced to you through Will, I believe, and Josh got connected that way. And I remember Tana's like, yeah, this guy Bryce, he's at Invictus, and he wants to just chat and kind of see what's going on, and after our initial conversation, it just like clicked perfectly. So I was like, yep, just get that sense of shared values and growth potential, and really just focus on, hey, I'm in this time, don't know how long I got, but let's try to make the most out of everything we have.
Yeah, totally. It was really from the beginning where it's like you feel a frequency with somebody else. You feel a connection to the brand identity, the ethos, and the mission. And, with that being said, one of the things that I love about Trident that I pulled off your website is connecting people and ideas in order to live out their fullest potential. And I love that. I think, what was it, maybe three and a half, almost 4 years ago, I lost my dad to brain cancer. And something that really stood out to me, when you spend time in a cemetery, you kind of look around a little bit and you're like, man, this is the richest place in the world. There's people here that had ideas on their couch that never came to fruition. They had potential that they were scared to pursue because they got stuck in the rat race, or, they had some sort of debt that they had to pay off. And what I love about Trident is that you're not only doing that personally, so there's no hypocrisy involved, but you're also inspiring other people to seek their edge and maximize their potential. And I think there's so much value in that. And when I say those things, what message would you like to kind of share with the world around maximizing human potential?
I think it starts with obviously an internal drive, but I don't get the best out of myself unless I surround myself with other people. So that's the whole idea with connecting with other like-minded individuals or people who challenge you to grow. Because again, you can have the best ideas in the world, but if you don't have maybe the right network or the right connection piece to like get that thing jump started, it might never get off the ground. And so that's why your network and the people around you and the people you associate with and those you're able to connect with and network with is so important to draw the best out of you. And so what's great about, being able to connect with people like you, all the other people we've met through Trident, is that it kind of gives you that extra push. It's like if you go to an empty gym, right? Are you able to push yourself? Or when there's someone else around kind of driving you and pushing you, we have great internal drive and intrinsic motivation sometimes, but it always helps to draw that last little bit of effort out and push you over that hump you might need to. So that's the whole goal with our mission statement, is to connect people and ideas to live out their fullest potential, because we know there's so much trapped inside of people that might need that one little spark or that one extra person that hey, talk to this guy. Like this guy, you're trying to do this, talk to him. He might be able to help you. Or talk to her. She's got this handled. So it's building that around, because you can do so much with takes a village. You guys, like, if you want to go fast, go alone. Do you want to go far, go together. Like that old African proverb. So it's super important to be around great people that are driven, motivated to get the best out of yourself.
Man, there's so many cool things that you have inside this amazing brain of yours that I'm so excited to unpack and kind of pull out today, or tease out a little bit. And I can't help but be curious, what was your childhood like, and how did the formation of Eric Johnson kind of begin?
So I was born right here in San Diego. Two great parents. My dad was a firefighter. My mom was staying at home, and I had have one older brother. Going through, high school sports, this, that, and the other. But both grandparents were in the military, and since my dad was a firefighter, that whole sense of service to others was something I was drawn to, and I wanted to be a pilot so bad. Top Gun. I mean, it's amazing.
The second Top Gun just got released.
So good. And so that's what my whole goal was going through high school. Like as soon as a sophomore, it's like, I want to do this. I want to fly jets. And so I figured out what I needed to do.
What was it about flying jets at that time that really intrigued you?
I think it's so cool to be up at that high and see perspective from something so different, and being, going as fast, and no one can touch you, and you're up at 35,000 feet and you're just looking down at everything and just kind of getting a whole different view of the world. Because I always wanted to be an astronaut. That was my 7-year-old goal growing up. It's I want to go into space.
And you just got too tall, man.
Yeah, I mean, I wish. Eyes were a little bit messed up. But I think it's kind of cool when you can see something from a different perspective. It just kind of gives you a different opportunity to look through a different lens and kind of see okay, hey, for me, I struggle with that still. But it just gives you different optics to look through a different situation. All right, is it all this, or is it this, maybe this? And so I just like the thought of being up in the sky, looking down and seeing the world from a different angle.
I love that. And I also think it's unique because it's something zoomed up has a certain frequency to it. But when you zoom out, you can really observe the different layers. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do today is how are you the way you are? What was it about, high school sports and the lenses that you had on your father, being a very dedicated firefighter, the service attributes that you saw, the changes in hours, the dedication to emergency medical services, but simultaneously being a safe space for the community. You embody all those things now. But did you know it at the time? Like, what were your lenses on some of these heroic figures like your father at the time? And, how have they helped shape who you are now?
It's funny because like you go back when you're, 10, 15, as a young adult growing up, you kind of have this viewpoint of these people doing amazing things, and you just realize, like, as I got a little bit older, like they're all human too. Mm-hmm. They're all doing the best they can do to provide. So, like, my dad and I've had good conversations about how him and my mom brought my brother and I up, and it's very different. Like, my dad's very much like nature, just like, all right, hey, as long as they don't die, I did my job. And then my mom's like, can be overbearingly nurturing side. She didn't want us to get hurt, and really kind of shelter and protect us from a lot of stuff, which wasn't bad. It's just kind of is what it is. So again, that blend of nature versus nurture, I kind of saw a little bit of both, which was good because my dad was always taking us out, fishing, hiking, shooting guns, just trying to do a bunch of different things. And my mom was just very much like, okay, I just got to make sure they do good in school and protect them and take care of them. And so I definitely got a good balance of both. And then going to the Naval Academy kind of throws you in as like a young 18-year-old and like, okay, brand new space, still don't know what the hell's going on. Didn't know what was going on for the first 3 weeks I was there. I was just like, I don't know what's happening.
Survive.
But I mean, I think we're a culmination of all of our experiences in that regard. So it's like the conversation versus nature versus nurture is like, it has to be both, right?
Oh yeah.
You can't
I want to bookmark that for a second though. You and I have had some special conversations offline around, this polarizing world that we're in. There's black, white, there's yes, no, there's left versus right. Mm-hmm. But I want to narrow that down into an introspective kind of lens for our audience where, the Navy is known for having this really strong masculine energy. Mm-hmm. But then you and I have also discussed the value of having feminine energy as well. And there needs to be a push and pull. We can relate that to fitness, right? You need to push, you need to pull, you need to optimize posture, but you also got to be strong pushing things. What are your thoughts on that? Like, when you look at the development of a human and the characteristics associated with maximizing potential, as we discussed, how does one develop the ability to have awareness of those two things versus getting societal pressure to be one or the other?
I think it's going to be hard. Obviously, it's going to be case by case, individual, and how the parents are able to bring them up. And unfortunately, the statistics are around high divorce rate at this point in time. So sometimes there's maybe not a strong father figure or whatever the case may be. I think it's a challenge. I think the military helps provide some sort of sense to a young person growing up. Around 18 years old, they're still very malleable and can hopefully put on some, if there has been a lack of core values driven, they can help guide that. But at the same time, it's so challenging to say how to put the right thing in for a person growing up because, again, there's so many different situations, so many different opportunities for something to go right, wrong, or indifferent. But I think if you come around the just core things of like, hey, the golden rule, I think it's just the best thing you can probably teach somebody to do. Just treat people as you kind of want to be treated, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't like getting yelled at, don't yell at people. If you don't like getting kicked, don't kick somebody. Just simple things like that, I think, can really solidify that. And we were just joking about like, hey, like, what is your biggest pet peeve? Is like if someone doesn't return their shopping cart, right? It's like, that's like just a telltale sign. Is like, you just give enough, you care enough just to make someone's life not miserable by their car hitting your shopping cart because you were too lazy to take it back.
But it goes back to the lenses, right? It's not just personal lenses of how does that shopping cart affect me? Oh, it takes me an extra 10 seconds to walk over there and do it. You're thinking from a little bit more of a global and community perspective of like, hey, if I don't put this away, now this employee is going to have to do this extra task. Well, 5 extra tasks is probably an extra 10, 15 minutes. If I'm so focused on being a little bit selfish in that moment, that task, if 30 to 50 people make that same choice that I make, now it's negatively influencing a broad and inclusive community. And so I think it's really about doing the next right thing. This episode is brought to you by Mush. My friends over at Mush created an incredibly cool product of ready-to-eat overnight oats. And for those of you that listen to the podcast often, you know simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And Mush has done just that, as their products have no more than 7 clean ingredients that are dairy-free, gluten-free, with no added sugar. Mush started right here at Invictus, as they had a vision to create convenient, healthy, and clean nutrition. And this landed them on Shark Tank, where the famous Mark Cuban invested in them. Now they're found in retailers all over the country, including Costco, Sprouts, Target, and Whole Foods. Check out my friends over at www.eatmush.com. Trident Coffee is sponsoring this episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. My guys over at Trident taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good and bad, and everything in between. At Trident, they're storytellers. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They help create connections through symbology and storytelling that engage their customers on an emotional level, and this distinguishes them from other coffee brands. You can find Trident in Imperial Beach and in Coronado. They offer over 14 plus nitro cold brews along with dairy-free options. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from their keto bakery. All these options will allow you to support your health and fitness journey with Trident Coffee. They're more than just a coffee company. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Once again, that's tridentcoffee.com. Use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Take your coffee experience to the next level. 2 important factors for us over at Invictus Mindset are true care and attention to detail. My friends over at RX Smart Gear have been bringing innovative fitness tools to the market since 2009. From their award-winning Evo speed ropes to their amazing gymnastics grips to their line of inflatable fitness equipment, they're constantly looking to problem solve within the fitness industry. They're always allowing us to have our gear work for us rather than against us. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use discount code Invictus Mindset to shop their latest cutting edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you.
And if you do the next right thing, you're thinking about it from a global perspective, and I think those little nuances can positively impact the world. They seem small, but they're actually like the cumulative effect can be really big.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you boil down, like, what would you start with? Would you start with communal responsibility or personal responsibility?
You got to start personal.
It has to be personal. You have to, like you said, make the next right decision, because that way, if everyone around you is doing that, then there's not much you have to pick up afterwards.
It almost makes it cool too. Like if one person's doing that, it almost is like you mentioned, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, it's like now you're doing it, now he's doing it, now she's doing it. It's like now all tides are going to rise. Iron sharpens iron, like we discussed previously.
Well, if you're going to your gym, right? If you have 10 members, 20 members in a class, and all of them wipe down after themselves, clean up after themselves, put the weights away, your job afterwards is easy. You know, chalk's all cleaned up, all ready to go.
Totally.
But you have 4 or 5 people that are like, oh, I'm in a rush, so sorry, I got to bounce. And all of a sudden now their weight is now passed on to the rest of either that crew or to you.
Yeah, totally.
And so it's one of those things where it's okay, yes, like just take yourself out of yourself for a little bit and just try to look at things from a different perspective. Like we get so tied into us. And sometimes it's good just to pull yourself out a little bit.
Very cool. As you were navigating high school sports, what was the sport that really gravitated your attention?
Well, we've never played, but basketball was my high school sport.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what was it about basketball that really hooked you in?
Well, I liked playing with a team. It was always great. So I was like normally the 2 or 3 guard, and it was just something I was always more like a defender. So like I would be able to hustle more, play more defense, and then we had a really good offense where it was very much just kind of very fluid. So it wasn't a one-on-one, anything like that. So we played very well together as a team. But that was, to me, was the funnest thing, is just being around those 12 guys in practice, getting our butt kicked, and then being able to go out on Tuesday, Friday night, whatever, and just play. And try to have as much fun as we could.
That's very
But
cool.
I love the team environment. Always
Isn't
a lot
there
of
a
fun.
little fun fact too? Didn't you go to high school with the buses?
I did, yeah. So I went to
From
school
the
with
Lakers.
the Bus family, yeah. It's funny, I don't think they didn't play basketball too much. But I think we'd play like rec or something like that from time to time. But yeah, really cool to see obviously what their family's been doing on the Lakers side. But they were really nice guys. They were awesome.
Very cool. We had that most recent Magic Johnson documentary come out, and
Yep.
you got to see a little bit, how the behind the scenes worked with, managing a team and the money and the pressure that comes with that, and how it really became about entertainment and the captivation of engagement and attention, and that then led to the growth and development of the players and the organization. It was very interesting because at that time you didn't see like sexual cheerleaders, and then all of a sudden Jerry Buss and Jeannie brought that to the forefront, and you didn't see like celebrities at games, and then all of a sudden that started happening, and it really like created this unique buzz that all of a sudden made the Lakers what they are today. It's very, very cool. A cool little fun fact. When you look back on your basketball career, what kind of metaphorical analogies would you pull from then into kind of the business world now? Other than the team engagement and striving to communicate and empower, what are some of the things that really stand out to you in relation to business?
Well, I mean, honestly, if you're playing on a team, which is what we have like 25 people on the team now. It's just trying to gather everybody on the common mission. Like, hey, what are we trying to do together? Because we still have, times where someone's like doing this, but it impacts another team member, and then it wasn't relayed properly. So we're just trying to like make sure everyone's driving towards the same common goal. So that's obviously a huge piece, and that starts with your mission statement and your core values, and drive home really solid.
What are those for you?
The core values?
Yeah.
So we have connection, community, and character. So if we make any of our decisions, so we tell all of our coffee tenders, all of our managers, hey, if you make a decision around those 3 core values, you're not going to go wrong. If it maybe wasn't the right decision at the time or something else, like fine, like we can go through that. But if you make the decision around those 3 things, we're going to be great.
I love that you also empower them to make the decision. As long as it fits within those parameters, you're not micromanaging every single decision they make. It's like, hey, community, character, and these 3 C's really align with how we want to grow and develop. And as long as you fit within that arena, go play.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Well, I say it gives the coffee tender an opportunity to make sure, hey, if a customer comes in and it maybe wasn't exactly happy, it's like, hey, how can we make their experience the best to make sure that the connection coming in is great and we're building the community around it too. So it's like kind of empower them to make sure, again, if it need to refund $20 or hear this and the other, like that is inconsequential. It's like they making the right decision for them, letting them know if you're based around those core values and making a decision for them, good to go.
I love that. Connection, community, and character. What is your mission statement?
What you read earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
Helping, connecting people and ideas live out their fullest potential.
Very cool. I think there's so many cool things to kind of unpack with this, but where I want to go next with our conversation is, how did you find yourself in the military? What was that process, and how did you make the decision to join the Navy?
Yeah, so when I was 16, I went to school up near Miramar, so they had the jets flying from the Marine Corps, and I would see them fly all the time. I was like, okay, that's going to be me. That's what I want to do. And so I initially thought I was just going to try to go for the Air Force because, hey, flying jets, Air Force makes sense. And then one of my good friends I went to high school with, his dad went to the Naval Academy, and Glenn was like, there's more pilots in the Navy than there are in the Air Force, right? I was
Isn't
like,
that interesting?
It's like, okay, cool.
So fascinating.
And so, long story short, I applied to the service academies and was able to get in my senior year, kind of the very end. I got probably one of the last admissions from my year. And so, in April, I found out I was going to the Naval Academy, and I was super
Huge
stoked.
honor. Very prestigious school.
It's a process for sure. Like, you got to get some sort of congressional representation and sign off, and the whole application process is pretty long. And so, luckily, I got that, and like the goal was always just to go be a pilot. So I didn't really care about anything else. I was probably going to be an engineer of some sort for school, and then as long as I got service selected pilot, life was good. So showed up there, and that's my whole focus for 4 years. Like, didn't really party too much, just pretty much did schoolwork, worked out, did what I was supposed to do, and I got service selection for pilot, which was great. and I got my degree in mechanical engineering. So 2 things accomplished, awesome. And then once I graduated, basically went down to flight school in Pensacola, and I went through a full-on physical, like a bunch of different processes, different tests, and they found out I have this really weird astigmatism. They're like, hey, you've got this. There's no waiver. There's no surgery. There's no procedure. There's nothing we can do. So you have to just basically pick a different job.
At that moment, being so young and creating this narrative in your brain of I'm going to do that. Obviously there's the movies and all the things that help formulate and really intensify that mental imagery for you. To have that being taken away from you based on, a medical exam, how did you handle that element of adversity?
At the time, I was crushed. Like I remember going back to my car, sitting in the parking lot of NAMI, the Naval Aviation Medical Institute or whatever it was called, and just like crying. I was like, I spent like 6 years doing this, and like this is all I ever wanted. And I called my mom and let him know, and I was just like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do. And so it was definitely like, this is where I've come to find, like the more stuff you have attached to your ego, the worse off you're going to be when it doesn't go your way, because it's going to be soul shattering. Because you identify so many things to that persona. If you can't live up to it for whatever reason, it can be very shaky.
Did you kind of have that in your back pocket in that moment around like, hey, I'm going to get my degree in engineering because if this doesn't work out, I can fall back?
I was plan A all the way.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to be pilot.
Yeah.
There was no, oh, I can use my engineering degree.
Yeah, for sure.
Because when that happened, they basically sent me to an office to talk to this guy. It's like, hey, we're kind of backed up right now. We don't have many options. You can either become a civilian, we can just cancel your contract and you can be out of the Navy. You can go submarines, or you can go Civil Engineer Corps. So I was like, I do not want to be in a submarine. No chance. And so luckily I had my mechanical engineering, which led me to be able to apply for Civil Engineer Corps and be an engineer for the Navy. And so that's what I ended up doing. I got selected and then started that about 8 months later. But during the whole time, like all my buddies are going through flight school, and I'm just like chilling in Pensacola, like working out twice a day, just like, oh, all my buddies are progressing.
At this time?
22.
So at 22, were you aware of the deconstruction of ego?
Oh, God, no.
So you had this mental identity associated with being a pilot. A lot of your friends and colleagues and people that you went to school with are now doing the thing that you pursued. That 8 months before you pursued this engineering career, what did that look like? What were some of the tools that you acquired along the way? What were some of the special conversations that you had? How did you kind of look inward to reconstruct your North Star, your new goal to pursue something different? I
think it stuck with me for a while. I don't think I fully was able to like grasp it even until even a few years after, because my next duty station was an air station, so I got to see all my buddies come through again that were flying, so I'd see them fly like every day. And so I think it's one of those things that you, at that young and not knowing obviously what I know now and not being surrounded by the people that I know, is that even when you go in the military, there's this uniform, this persona, ego's attached to that. And so when people take off the uniform and transition out of the military, it can be very, very challenging. I get to work with emerging vets and players, which is centered theme around this problem set, is that if you're, especially when you're 18, you go into something and they mold you in kind of the way they want you to. A lot of your internal, I guess, creativity, a lot of some of these things can get kind of put to the back burner. And so your own identity as a person can kind of just basically get flushed into what the military wants you to do and how they want you to act. But when you take that uniform off and you haven't really built up anything behind that, it can be very, very challenging for people like, well, who am I now that I'm not in the military? Like, people aren't telling me what to do. What do I do every day? And how do I become something different? Totally. So that's definitely a huge challenge, but that's anything with identifying your ego to something and not knowing that, you're more than just one thing. You shouldn't attach anything just like I'm in the military. I'm a police officer. I'm this, I'm that. Like your humans are very complex.
Super complex. Also incredibly malleable, as you discussed before. But something that's so fascinating to me that really stands out around this is this concept of gamification within the world, where it's like, hey, if you do this thing, you're going to get this paycheck or this ranking, or you're going to move up in the world. And at a young age, if it doesn't work out, I feel like most people would kind of get stuck in that, right? Like, oh, if I listen to what they're saying and I conform, now I'm going to move up, within, my current military status. How did you not get stuck in that? how did you create this lens, like we discussed previously, and really understand that, like, some of my time I am an engineer, some of my time I am, with my military friends, some of my time I'm a student doing this, some of my time, all these different spokes in the wheel. But at the hub or the nucleus of that is, I am a human, and I can be whatever I want to be. Like, how did you create that in your brain?
I was very fortunate. I mean, I had a very unique military career. I did 4 deployments in 5 years, Spain and Israel with the CB battalion, a GSA to Afghanistan with the Army, and then 2 tours to Iraq. And so I got to be around so many different people from so many different parts of the military. So it was really cool to see. I think it's like, I love like meritocracies, like where, I wanted to be responsible for the outcomes that I had. Cause I think when I gave the military the opportunity to let me be a pilot and that didn't work out, I felt like shell shocked. So I was like, I'm never gonna let that happen again. So I'm going to take control of what I can, and I want to be responsible for the outcomes so if I put in more effort, I want to see the results for that effort. But the military is not set up that way. So after 8 years in there, you're seeing like everyone kind of promotes no matter how good or how bad they were. We had people that didn't get what we call fit reps that were appropriate. They just, cause like, all right, hey, you were the new guy, so you get the middle of the road, and then the guy that's been here for 2 years, he gets the top thing, even though he's not performing better than you. So I was like, okay. So I saw how the kind of the game was played.
I love that you saw that and you questioned that, because it's like, this concept of time is so fascinating to me. It's like, well, let's use the gym. Since we like talking about fitness, you go to the gym for 7 hours and not get anything done. You can also go to the gym for 7 minutes and get a lot done.
Oh, yeah.
And so this concept of time is so fascinating to me, because in the societal narrative around work, it's like, oh, you're the seasoned veteran. You might as well get the promotion or the raise, even though you've gotten stagnant and a little bit lazy in the last 5 years. But, Joe Schmo, just started and he's busting his tail back here. But because he's only been in the career for 3 years and that guy's been in the career for 13 years, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. And I love that you kind of question traditional norms, because most people would argue, oh, that's just the way it is. Except it's not.
No, it's
or it shouldn't be, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, again, the military is this huge system, and it's not probably going to change anytime soon with how it's kind of gone. But the hard part is when you're in there and you do well, you get the curse of competency. Like, one of my first bosses told me this, and she was spot on. She was great. She was probably one of the best leaders I've had. But she's like, Eric, unfortunately, you have the curse of competency. You do very, very well, and so you're going to always get more work than the person who is just doing average. Because the person who's doing average is the commander is not going to give them the special task because they know it's not going to get done or done right. And so I'd always get more added to my plate, but like at the same time, type A person, I love challenges. I love doing work. I'd rather be busy than bored. But after a while, like, I saw a guy that was a couple years older than me, just should not have been a military officer, just put it that way. Great guy, super nice, but just didn't have what it took to lead people. And he was, he was in for 10 years as a lieutenant. He was making really, really good money, and he was doing nothing. Like, we couldn't give him anything to do for responsibility-wise. So I was like, okay, see, that's not something I necessarily enjoy being a part of, because it promotes just complacency. And that's something I want to always be striving for being the best version of myself. And that takes growth out of your comfort zone. And you can't do that from a stagnation.
Totally. The curse of complacency. It's so interesting, like, to see that, but then you evolve that and you verbalize it kind of like the curse of competency. And it's so interesting to kind of see it from that lens, and also just to humbly observe your younger brother and the fact that you grew up observing your older brother. So you naturally in the workplace are going to observe those who are a little bit ahead of you and take notes, like, oh, this is the right thing to do, this is not the right thing to do. And along the way, you're just acquiring more and more tools in your toolbox, which is super cool. And I can't help but throw out, you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. That seems to always work for the most part.
There's a counter to that. It's like, give something to a lazy person, because they're going to get it done the fastest way possible, because they don't want to be working.
That's well played.
But I mean, it also goes down to the skill set of the person. There's so many things to go into it. But like, inherently, if you're efficient, sometimes you get punished for being efficient, right? So it's like, okay, you did awesome, you did this really good, cool, here's another thing. It's like, no, like,
goes back to that time narrative.
Yeah.
I want to take a dive into your deployments now.
What were those experiences like? Obviously different culture, different energy, different currency, different weather. There's a lot of different things that you have to submerge yourself into and learn to be comfortable with. Is there anything that really stands out in your brain from some of your early deployments to your later ones?
Well, so I said I was fortunate. I got to go to Spain and Israel for my first deployment, Afghanistan, then Iraq, and then a bunch of little spots around the Middle East, just kind of a couple day trips here and there. But I mean, the coolest thing I can attest to it is that no matter what, obviously there's very much cultural difference, there's language differences, there's this, that, and the other. But when you start asking some of these people like, hey, why do you do what you do? It's such a human response. It's like, I do this to keep my family safe. I mean, that doesn't change. Basic human wants and needs don't really change. And so, yes, like the cultures are going to be slightly different how they approach it. But like I was talking to an Iraqi colonel, and he fought against us during the first Gulf War in the 90s, fought against us during the second invasion in the early 2000s, and now he's fighting alongside with us against ISIS. And he's just like, yeah, I do just keep my family safe. And we're like, okay, that's kind of why we're here, And so you realize the human approach to it when you can kind of, again, take off some of the different lenses and some of the different perspectives that you have on there. And when you can talk to them like, hey, as a human, we have a lot in common. And that's kind of why we do coffee the way we do, is that when you can sit back and if you focus on the differences, you're going to find the differences. When you focus on, hey, what do we have in common? What can we come together to and become? And it's a force multiplier. Because you're always worried about what's different from everybody else, then yes, you're going to find those differences. You're going to find a reason not to like that person or whatever. But when you can say, hey, like you may think this similar to me on this, let's focus on that. Then you can, it's 1 + 1 is 2, or sometimes it's 4 or 5. It depends on the force multiplier piece. So when you can connect with somebody and work with them, it's a game changer.
It's such a high level of emotional maturity, in my opinion, to really put yourself in their shoes. And you're like, man, if I was in his shoes, I'd probably be doing the same thing. And then obviously you can connect around coffee. That's a beverage that, is very common in many places around the world. How were you guys in those special conversations able to create separation between emotion and logic?
Sometimes I don't think you do it in the time. Like, again,
it's like, how do I like you if you were shooting at me?
Yeah, who I was probably several years ago is different, because I remember. So it's funny. There's an anniversary today of when our base got blown up, and so the guy that we were working with. So I was there from June, and our main point of contact is like all the guys we have our key leader engagements with, and we trusted and we're working with them. And come to find out they were planning this for several weeks ahead of time, and he knew about it but just didn't tell us, and he happened just to skip town that day, and the base gets blown up. And then we still then continue to go back and do these key leader engagements afterwards with him. And, at that time you're pissed. You're absolutely infuriated. But then you realize like that guy's like, they would have killed him straight up. Like we lost several Afghan engineers because they would go down, do surveys for us or X, Y, and then just disappear. Taliban pick them up and you never hear from them again. So you realize if you put yourself in their shoes, like, we as American soldiers and coalition forces won't obviously hurt them or harm them, whatever. We're asking them to do what we're doing, pay them some money. But Taliban didn't care; they'd kill them. And so if you're thinking about your family or what you want to do, it's like, yeah, what are you going to do to keep your family safe?
Totally.
So it's just it sucks, and like obviously you don't see that very very much, and that perspective is very different when you're there. But when you can kind of take a step back and reflect on it, it's like they're doing everything they could to keep their family safe.
I want to go a little deeper here. There's a famous statement or quote that you've heard many times. Perception is reality. Most military people hate that line. It's not true. But if you're part of the Taliban and you're witnessing somebody that you think is an ally having coffee with an American, well, it creates a certain level of perception. You, being somebody that's very competent, understand the various lenses placed on a given situation. What are your thoughts when I kind of paint this picture? And what's the appropriate handling of a situation like that? You're trying to engage, you're trying to learn, you're trying to connect, you're trying to find a common ground, but they can't hear your conversation. They're just seeing, oh, that person's talking to that person. They're probably delivering some sort of confidential information, right? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, everything was different for there. So if we had, every time we would hold meetings, there'd be guys in the back kind of walking around. They were They were just Taliban. They were everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They would kind of sit from afar, listen in, kind of cruise around. But you'd go around and have these key leader engagements. And we were just literally there to help. Like we want to do everything we could to make sure that the Afghan country could sustain itself by the time we whatever decided to leave. So I worked with like 3 ministers from different sections, like agricultural, water, interior, to like build roads, make sure they had the canal system set up, whatever they needed to do from a construction standpoint so they could sustain themselves when we're gone. And we'd have those meetings time and time again. And at the end of the day, it's like we would try our best, but it's so hard sometimes to get them to kind of see it from their lens too, because again, they're literally being threatened on a daily basis from when they go home. And so it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, you do your best you can, but then that there's other pressures outside that the game was not set in our favor. It was set up to the point where like so many people went there, best of intentions, worked their ass off, and it's frustrating to see how it all kind of flailed out because it was about a year ago now that we did the final pull out of Afghanistan. So it's just it can be very frustrating.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you sharing some of this insight with us and helping us kind of understand your specific experience, because it's one of those things where sometimes in the world there's judgment, and I think it is very important to seek to understand, but sometimes these things that come to the forefront or that are thrown into the political world, it's not necessarily that person. It's the things that are going on, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And there's, money and transactional things. There's fear. There's violence. There's so many different variables that get associated with it. And so, I just throw that out there for our listeners to kind of gain some perspective, do your own personal research, ask appropriate questions, and truly seek to understand rather than just, here are my thoughts based on this situation. And, that's a limited lens based on your personal experience. Like there's so many different other experiences to be had. And so I think that story really epitomizes, that statement.
Well, it's just, again, life is very complex. We want it to be simple as best we can. So we make patterns, we make assumptions based off of our own experiences, but we're never going to know 100% the full truth of any situation, right? There's always going to be a little bit of information here. You gather this, you see something, perception, you try to put it together because our brain just wants to make patterns. We just want to make a pattern so we can move on to the next thing. So you use less brain power thinking about the next thing. But yeah, it's very hard. So like I totally agree with that. Just being able to like ask good questions, don't make any assumptions, or don't try not to throw your opinion so heavy on somebody that just have a conversation. Because you can learn a lot more just by a little bit of back and forth instead of like
for sure
just go so heavy on what you believe.
I also think that words are an approximation of what we're actually trying to convey. And nowhere does that really get highlighted than when you're in another country. And or when somebody from another country is visiting your homeland and you're trying to communicate, and there's body language and there's hand gestures, and you're trying to do anything and everything possible to create that. Here's the messaging that I'm trying to share to you. And it's just fascinating that popped in my brain around this idea that in some cases, we're trying to communicate the same thing, but we're saying it in different ways. And, it's just a fascinating component to me. And you mentioned our brain is trying to simplify everything. I almost think that's because most education systems, going back to the gamification of capitalism, are designed to be memorize these concepts for this exam, and then you will be awarded a score. And that score then, puts you in some sort of category to move on to the next level. It's like a video game. You do well on this, you go to Naval Academy. You do poor on this, you go to junior college. And it's a unique ideology because it takes away the competency that you got complimented for while you were in the military. You're not actually trying to critically think. You're actually memorizing. What are your thoughts on those two differences? Critically thinking and memorizing, and some of the challenges associated with those two.
Yeah, sometimes the critical thinking aspect is very, very different. Like I think I'm lucky I was an engineer because while you're going through certain engineering classes, it's all about problem solving. And so, yes, there is kind of a way, there is a right answer, but it's like, okay, if I have this, I have an input, I have a black box, I have an output, what's going on inside that black box that I can kind of think about, and like for, jet engine combustion, like what's going on inside. So I know that you get compression, you get, all these things that are happening. So I think that helps for me for the critical thinking aspect of it. And then obviously just being exposed to real world stuff. When you get sheltered, I mean, they always say book smart versus street smarts type thing. I think once you can get out, like you can learn a lot from business by watching a very, very street smart person that maybe has no formal education, but they know how to read people. They know how to talk to people. They know how to work through situations. They know how to think on their feet. And that's something that's very hard to teach. I think that's a very innate thing. But I'm not a huge fan of how the current school system's thing set up, because again, like you shouldn't also think less of somebody who may want to go be a plumber, an auto mechanic, or this, that, and the other, thinking that, hey, you have to go to a 4-year college to be successful. I don't think that's the right lens to be paid. I think more people are realizing that now, because again, like you have people who are C and D students that aren't good at school because their attention span is somewhere else, like they don't want to learn this stuff. So forcing them to learn it could be more detrimental, because then you make them maybe feel less smart than they actually are.
And the learning environment, sitting in a classroom listening to a lecture with artificial light, no exposure to nature, limited interaction. I don't know. That doesn't sound that fun.
No, especially if you aren't paying attention, you get labeled as like a problem child or potentially stupid. And it's like, that's not the right way to like nurture a kid to figure out what are you good at? Like what's something that you can very well excel at? And that doesn't really mean that they're going to be good at calculus, or necessarily they're going to be good at biology or these things. It's like, okay, let's try to maybe find your strength. So I like the fact that you can maybe have a little more blended approach, like go back to like auto mechanic school or some other thing like trade work while you're doing it, because you can work with your hands. You can kind of work through that problem solving set. Like, hey, how do I put this carburetor on an engine? Little things like that, I think, would go a long way.
For sure. Teaching those real life skills, and then just observing the innate body language when somebody is attacking, whether it's woodworking, and then occasionally some of the mechanic and the engineer things, and then other times maybe it's financial literacy or business development, and then seeing like, hey, what perks their eyebrows a little bit? Where do they really come alive? Where do they start giving more of their opinions? And then when do they shy away a little bit? And then kind of leaning into that a little bit and giving gentle suggestions and mentorship. Because how often do we see in the real world, I mean, most people have no idea how to do their taxes. And it's like, man, like that's a really valuable skill. And it's almost like, wait, is it on purpose? I don't know. Like
it's 84,000 pages in IRX tax code. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's not simple at all.
No.
Like there's a lot to investigate in there if it's 84,000 pages.
Yeah.
And going back to your experiences with deployment, when you're having these connections, with how competent you are, how emotionally intelligent you are, how did you start to formulate and how did the wheels start spinning around, man, should I create a coffee company?
So I think it was basically the onus for that was I got back from my 3rd deployment and I'm talking to my detailer to figure out, hey, what's next for me? Because I was like, I'm still on the fence. I'm about like 7 years. So if I can get past 10, you kind of just stay in for the pension and this, that, and the other. So I was like, hey, I've been on 3 deployments. I want to stay in San Diego. I just kind of bought and built a house. It's my home. I want to stay here for 3 years and just do a shore tour. And they're like, hey, sorry, man, all we got for you is Guam or Japan. And, you're young, single, so we can ship you out easier than it is to move like a married person, X, Y, and Z. He's like, okay, I'm good. I guess it's a good stopping point for me. So I submitted my paperwork to resign my commission. And at that point, I knew I had about a year left in the military, and then I got to figure something out. So for me, was funny is that I went to a job fair. It's called Service Academy Career Conference, and I hate dressing up. Like I absolutely hate it. I don't like suit and ties. It's not for me. Even though I wore a uniform for almost 12 years. It just felt restrictive, And so I go there. I have like a blazer on, khakis, and everyone's dressed to their nines, like they have briefcase, like looking super professional, like they want to go work on Wall Street. And I just like I walked around there for like 30 minutes and just had a panic attack. I was like, this is not what I want to do. I don't care about talking to any of these companies. And so luckily one of my old roommates was there working for one of the companies at one of the booths. I was like, hey, Leland, can we just go grab coffee real fast, man? I got to get out of here. And so we sit down and, he talks about his experience of transition and what he was doing. And so I walked out of there and I was like, okay, I gotta work for myself. I can't work for anybody else. I can't have somebody telling me what to do and calling the shots anymore. So at that point, that was the decision point of, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I said, I have about a year to plan, so let's figure it out. And from there, I did a couple things like Boots to Business is one of the programs that military offers. And I always come around like, hey, what do I want to do? Do I want to start a gym? Like I always loved working out, or what do I want to start a coffee company because like of X, Y, and Z. I landed on a coffee company for all of the reasons of how it felt like, because I worked out all the time in the military on deployments, but coffee was one thing that was always what brought people together, like the caffeine, the pre-workout, all that stuff. But I was like, this is great. And so from there, that was kind of the jump start.
That's so cool to me. Just the element of transition is so fascinating to me. Like whether that's transitioning from the workplace to going home to being a parent to, whatever you're transitioning to. I just think in life sometimes those low moments when we're absolutely lost and we're just overcome with childlike curiosity and we're just like looking around, all of a sudden that's when you start to see the things.
Yep.
And in that moment you had that conversation with your buddy around, man, I can't do that. And I think a lot of education, just to complement it as well, is it's teaching us what we don't want, what not to do. And I think there's value in that. That's process of elimination, right? And, so you got to this moment where you decided, hey, I want to pursue the evolution of a coffee company. I want to be an entrepreneur. I love the term entrepreneur because it really, to me, means anybody trying to better themselves and create opportunities for others. It's like, hey, there's no path. Let me carve a path in this mountain. And I always lean into that quote, like, do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. And I mean, you're doing that now. Like, it's so cool because I'm a cold beverage guy.
Yep.
I'm not a big fan of hot beverages because then they burn my taste buds and I can't taste all the awesome food out there. But for a very long time, it's like you order a coffee and I'm like the weirdo, like grabbing ice cubes, putting it in there. And it's like the fact that you created this is so relevant to so many people. I'm sure I'm not the only guy putting ice cubes in coffee, like.
Well, so it's funny. So in Israel, my counterpart was awesome. He was a 27-year Israeli Air Force major, and he would take me to his office all the time. Like, he'd pick me up. We'd drive across the base where Americans weren't allowed, and we'd go into his office. He was like basically second command on the base. And we'd sit down, and he'd always make us Turkish-style coffee. So scorching hot. I remember it's like burning the roof of my mouth several times. I'm like, okay, I got to fix it. So I just figured I should like let it cool down a little bit, and I'd start drinking it. But yeah, I same thing. I was always a cold coffee person. I'd get like a quad shot at Starbucks as a pre-workout. And but being here in San Diego, the craft beer scene is just, we're like a mecca. Like so many great artisanal people have started these breweries and created such a great fan following and cult classics because people are drawn to it, and so, but we didn't see that with coffee. And so we saw this opportunity here to create this cold brew company that mirrored a brewery, but gave you the coffee experience that you wanted. And so that's kind of where we saw our really differentiator is that, hey, focusing on cold brew. That's how we're going to do it. But no one was doing cold brew at the time. Like there was probably like 2 or 3 companies out there in the U.S. that were focusing on cold brew.
For sure.
I remember I got laughed at. I went to the Specialty Coffee Association Expo up in Seattle, like in 2017. And I'm like talking to people, hey, this is my idea. I'm going to do this. And like all these old heads just laughed at me. It's like, no, espresso's the only way to do coffee. Like this is a fad. You'll never make it. And so I kind of like took that as a chip on my shoulder. Like, okay, like show them. And so here we are. I mean, we're still one of the only places that does cold brew like we do it. But we see that as being an opportunity to educate people really on why cold brew, in my eyes, is better from a health and wellness standpoint. You get more caffeine, less acidity, easier on your teeth, on your stomach. So, I mean, we're seeing these things like cancer thriving right now, but they also thrive in acidic environments, and they also tend to thrive when you are consuming a lot of sugar and dairy and processed stuff on a daily basis. So we're trying to do it from a healthier standpoint where we can kind of cut back on a lot of that stuff. So if we can make it with, less milk and cream, less sugar, and get you to kind of come back and just try the cold brew. It's like there's so many things that we're trying to do to get people to focus on the health and wellness side that they may not even be seeing.
Yeah, for sure. It's really cool too, the holistic and naturopathic approach that you're taking because, in the military and in sport in general, you see a lot of pain. In life right now, we see a lot of mental illness. We see anxiety. We see depression. There's correlative effects to lack of movement. There's correlative effects to leaning on pharmaceutical drugs. And, Western medicine, it does work. You need it, and you need this naturopathic approach. And I think they both play off of each other, just like we talked about earlier with the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine energy. I think there is value to both. It doesn't need to be either or.
I'd like to take a moment to thank our friends over at Vuori. They are bringing a new perspective on performance apparel. Their products are incredibly versatile and allow for freedom and flexibility in any arena. As humans, we are complex creatures, always on the move and always on the go. Allow Vuori to join you as you navigate the complexities of the human experience. Whether you are training, adventuring, lounging, traveling, or attending meetings, Vuori has options to suit your active lifestyle. My personal favorites are the men's core short and their line of Ponto performance products, which are so incredibly soft. Check these guys out over at vuori.com/Invictus Mindset for 20% off your very first purchase and free shipping. That's VUORI.com/Invictus Mindset for 20% off your very first purchase and free shipping. Everything they have is designed to work out in, but doesn't look or feel like it. It's so freaking comfortable that you won't want to wear anything else. Breathing, movement, circulation, digestion. What do all these body functions have in common? Our muscles. There are over 600 muscles in the human body that are responsible for supporting our daily activities. That's why your muscle health is incredibly important. On this podcast, I always discuss seeking our peak expression and striving to maximize our human potential. And so I try to share with you the top products that I find on the market. My H&B is a clinically proven ingredient that has been shown to help build and maintain lean muscle mass, increase strength, improve recovery, and enhance body composition. Learn more about your muscle health at myhmb.com/Invictus. Once again, that's myhmb.com/Invictus. Enhance your muscle health and enhance your life.
But what I do love about your approach, you mentioned the acidity. Well, in order to mask the acidity and some of the bitterness of really strong coffee, sugar, milk, dairy, inflammatory things for most people, not everybody. And so what I love is that you're creating a coffee cocktail that maximizes all of the currently known potential benefits and decreases the majority of the side effects. That's genius, man.
Well, I mean, yeah, we have the MCT oil, we have the monk fruit, so we have really good sweetener that is shown to be, zero, no glycemic load, and then the MCT oil is a really great healthy fat that can, basically will feed your brain for instead of having sugar, you can use this short chain, medium chain fat. And so all those benefits are there and have been really found out in the past 10 years. People have been kind of using these things and figuring things out, and it's one of the best ways for me to drink coffee. And one, if I do intermittent fasting, just complements it so well. So for me, it's a huge benefit because I probably drink more than I should on the coffee standpoint, but it's great to start that morning off with an MCT oil coffee, and then I'm really good for several hours, and then I can have my first meal.
For sure, and it's sustaining too. It's not that quick jolt followed by the crash. And I also want to share some love and kind of point people, because you and I have great conversations all the time around some of the research associated with intermittent fasting and MCT oil and some of the lifestyle factors that come from the integration of a nice little jolt kickstart of coffee. And Andrew Huberman does a great job of referencing those things. Peter Attia does a great job referencing those things. Dr. Rhonda Patrick. There's so many people out there that are in alignment with this, and you're constantly doing your research, right? You're not one of those stagnant CEOs that's nah, I got to figure it out. It's my way or the highway. It's you're always evolving. You're layering on top. Maybe that worked, maybe it didn't. You're always asking the right questions and seeking to understand within the field, and that keeps you kind of on this really, really nice upward trajectory,
Well, like you said, the day you think you know everything is the day you're screwed. The day you stop learning is you just put a fork in it, you're done.
Yeah.
So we've tried stuff that hasn't worked. I think I've had way more failures than I've had successes, just because you have to try stuff. You have to push the boundary a little bit. You have to figure out what works, what doesn't. especially in the space where there isn't really somebody to look to. There isn't a model like, yeah, let's just follow these guys and just kind of do it a little bit differently. So with us kind of pushing the limit on cold brews, that we've had to learn things. We've had to learn how to do the draft systems. We had to learn how to do the brewing, how to learn make sure we get the right water profile. All these things were through trial and error, and always just trying to research how to do it better. And so, and again, I think we do it from a physical standpoint. Hey, what foods can we eat? What exercises can we do? Can we do cold plunge? Can we do sauna? Can we do this? Can we do that? And it's always just trying to make ourselves better. And the same thing goes with the product. So it's just, kind of dovetails into each other very nicely.
Yeah, for sure. There's obviously transferable skills from the military to business. But when you go backwards to that transitionary period and you were asking questions at this job fair and you're integrating with Boots to Business, what were some of the things that helped create a sustainable processes and procedures for you? And what ultimately led you to the Masters of Business for Veterans at USC?
Yeah, so the USC was great. I basically got out of the military, then 3 days later the program started. So it was just
How'd you hear about it?
So it was funny. I was at a Friendsgiving at my house, and one of the friends that I had was in the Navy. He was a culinary specialist, and he was over. He's like, "Hey, have you heard about this great program? Like, I'm going to apply to it in a few years when I'm ready." I was like, "Oh, that could be the good thing for me. It's only a 1-year master's. It's fast. It focuses on entrepreneurship. It's got a great network from the USC side of the house, and so it made perfect sense." So I remember doing the interview in Iraq with the program administrator. And so I'm sitting there on the Skype call and doing the interview and luckily got accepted to there. But it really, I think I definitely needed that coming off of being in the military for 8 years active duty, needed something to dive and keep myself busy while building Trident. But the network I've got, I've like 2 of my business partners are from the same program, and it is just such a great thing to be around. It's like-minded individuals, but also keep our driving and trying to be successful as well. And so it was a great group to be around and really push me because we get to go back and kind of show the story. And so like you always want to like one up next from the year prior and just kind of that continual push to be better.
You guys did that recently, right? You went up to USC and kind of gave some nuts and bolts of the development of Trident.
Yeah, it's been great. We still keep in touch with Tommy Knapp, who's our entrepreneurship instructor there. So he invites us back about like once a year to talk with the new cohort about entrepreneurship because they themselves are transitioning veterans or military members or veterans. And so giving somebody that kind of look to and aspire to is like, hey, like these guys made the jump. They've done it. Because entrepreneurship is very, very scary. Like I remember having to give up a lot to start it. But at the end of the day, I was like, high risk, high reward. I get to be responsible for the outcome. So it was something that I was willing to do. But I didn't have a wife, didn't have kids, didn't have all these other things at the time. And so it was easy for me to make that and just go all in. And, it's very, very scary though. To dive into that, it can be a lot for somebody to try to bite off and chew because if they have a safety net, like, well, my job pays well right now and this, that, and the other. So I was like, okay, well, I don't have a paycheck. Let's just go and just figure it out from there.
Yeah, for sure. I love that all-in approach. Just take the leap and figure it out later.
Yep.
What were some major takeaways that you would like to share with up-and-coming entrepreneurs that maybe you keep with you in your mental file cabinet from the USC Business School?
I think the hardest thing for me is that in the military and I took a lot of pride in this, but it also can be very hurtful. It's like I was always this like kind of the subject matter expert. I was very specialized in what I did. So as the engineer, I was always giving the best engineer advice to whomever and doing this. And so getting to the point where that hindered me because I thought I had to know everything. So I would spend hours researching stuff, just trying to like pull apart YouTube, pull apart Google, but I didn't even take the time to figure out a few people and just go talk to them, like make a phone call. So the network piece of it is huge. So you don't have to know everything. Don't try to know everything. Focus on your strengths and then just surround yourself with great people where you can ask these questions and make the phone calls because you will save yourself so much headache.
I love the idea of phone calls. Kobe talked about that during his career when he was trying to add different skill sets to
call MJ.
Yeah, he'd call MJ. He called Hakeem Olajuwon for footwork advice. He was calling Kareem for different, shot methodologies. And it's so fascinating because it's deconstruction of the ego once again.
Yep.
You make that phone call and you're asking for help. The ego wants to say, well, why should I ask for help? I'm a professional basketball
This is a man who calls himself the Black Mamba, and he knew he didn't know the best things for that, so he'd ask for the best.
Yeah. That's super cool that you had the willingness to, and the bravery and the courage too, to pick up the phone. How did you get access to some of these people, and what was that process like?
I mean, I'm still learning it. I'm still walking through a lot of the stuff. I said I have 2 great business partners right now that really complement my strengths with what my weaknesses are. And so Josh is a phenomenal connector. He's able to talk to anybody and just get him to they like him automatically. He's super personable. I mean, you got an engineer, a little more secluded, a little bit more methodical, and maybe not be as approachable sometimes. But he's able to connect us with so many great people, and he's like, hey, let's talk to this person. Let's get on a phone call. Let's call him and ask. And so having those people in your corner to help set that stuff up has been great. But you'd be surprised on how much people want to help you just by a LinkedIn email or message, kind of out of the blue. There's not many people who don't want to help other people. And so just having kind of the audacity to ask the question and just try to add value where you can. Like, hey, can I take you out to lunch? Can I want to ask you about this, or can I buy you a cup of coffee? And so it's one of those things where just putting yourself out there, you're going to get some no's. That's okay. But not being afraid to ask people for help is, I think, one of the biggest things as an entrepreneur you need to learn how to do.
If you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Correct.
I think the other thing that's really cool here is how much internal work you've done, right? Really studying yourself and getting to know, hey, here's my strengths. Here's my weaknesses. I need somebody to help gap fill some of these weaknesses, because sometimes the perception is very polarizing. It's, I'm going to double down on my strengths, screw my weaknesses. Well, that doesn't always benefit. And then other times it's, I know those will always be there. I'm going to double down on making my weaknesses strengths. And those aren't your natural default. And so I think it's really cool that you immediately were like, okay, I need to add people to the team in these arenas. How did you ultimately make that decision?
I think just out of point where I cannot do this anymore by myself.
Because you're definitely not a desk guy, as you've attributed.
No, and so it's a painful realization. It's okay, hey, I can do this for another 6 months, and the wheels are going to come burning off, and then completely derail. And so it was okay, well, this is what I want to get to. This is what I want to build. You can't do it yourself, and that's totally fine. So finding the people that complement where my weaknesses are has been the best thing to do for myself as well as for the business. And so having those 2 guys really be able to bounce ideas off of on a consistent basis has been very, very great for me to come up and out of the business, not working in the business all the time, because that can get draining and exhausting. Be able to look at the bigger picture of hey, what can we take this into? What's the aspirational goals for Trident, and how do we get there? Because as a CEO, you're the only one that's going to be doing it. So if you're focused on all the minute details on a day in, day out basis, year after year, month after month, it's you're not going to be able to go up and out anymore. You're just stuck. Next day, what's the next day? What's the next day? What's the next year? What's the next 5 years? What's the next 10 years? Only you as a CEO are going to be able to do that.
For sure. Who's the other gentleman that's super helpful other than Josh?
You have Derek.
Gotcha.
So Derek was a Marine for 20 years. Fantastic at small unit leadership, fantastic at small unit organization, and having to run, a group of 20 people. So he has a lot of the basically day-to-day operations he's going around tackling. So I don't have to hear about it. I don't have to necessarily worry about a lot of that stuff. We still have conversations about X, Y, and Z on a consistent basis, but a lot of that little stuff he's able to kind of stop it from getting to me, fix it, and then let me know about it.
Derek is literally the epitome of get shit done.
Yes.
When I've spent time with him, I'm like those 3 words just summarize him in a nutshell.
Yep.
And Josh is just incredibly personable and just really does such a great job sharing the mission, the ethos, and really creating a vision for the brand to help get people intrigued, so that way you can deepen the relationship. I think you've really surrounded yourself with great people. So we talked a little bit around the formation of the brand and the product development and how it related to craft beer. How did you ultimately instill some of the storytelling components and the symbology?
I always thought that was a huge portion of it, right? Because again, us as humans, the way we developed our own ability to communicate with each other was through symbols and storytelling. So we would draw on cave walls of animals or whatever, but we'd also sit around fires and tell stories once we got, the verbal piece down. And so that's ingrained into how we communicate. It's very, very animalistic, very tribal. It's what it is. And so for us is that, hey, if we can create an awesome brand that has these symbols and has these stories and have these messages behind it, it'll create a much more deeper emotional connection with them, instead of like, hey, let me just get a dark roast coffee. That's just so transactional. Vice, like, hey, how can we create an experience?
Yeah.
And so by creating that experience, is like, all right, now we have people coming in, hey, let me get the damn torpedoes. Let me get the Stoic Bond. Let me get the Anchors Away. And so they're buying into that vernacular, buying into what we're presenting ourselves as a tribe. I mean, once you speak the language, you're like, you're in as the tribe member, right? Like you speak the language, you walk the walk, and cool, you're one of us. And so that has been super fun to do, because like I remember starting out, I was like, okay, well, like, oh, this is going to work. I don't know. We'll figure it out. And like after a while, when people coming in, because like, you still have people like, oh, I like a dark roast, like a medium roast. So look, let me tell you about the options we have. Give them, pour out samples, this, that, and the other. And the second time they come in, I was like, oh, I really like that commenter pressure you had. Let me try that one again, or let me try a different one. And we get to tell them another story and walk them through another opportunity. It can be a little bit much at first, especially when you're walking in and coffee's been done a certain way for so long, that when you see this opportunity to get all these different styles, it can be a little overwhelming. And that's the education piece of it, to make it more of an experience, not a transaction.
I love the educational piece, but I also think, you remember back in the day, 21 flavors?
Oh, yeah.
And then you got the little samples.
Was it 31 flavors?
Was it?
I think it was 30. That's when I was 31 flavors.
31 flavors?
Yeah.
So you got the little sample spoon.
Yep.
And you guys do something very similar to like frozen yogurt or the 31 flavors, where you give people like a sample of each one. And that is not only just an opportunity for them to have an organic experience that is uniquely theirs, but then it's like, hey, what do you feel when you taste that? What are the notes? And some people will be like, it's just coffee. But then it's an opportunity now to connect by sharing. You're giving them something, but you're also sharing storytelling, the symbology, where it came from. And there's layers to it now versus just a transactional coffee, like you mentioned.
Well, same thing when you go to breweries here and you go to like vineyards, same thing, right? They're going to bring you out different styles of beer, different styles of wine, and you get to like sample and taste them. And then especially they're there and they're giving you the education piece, they're telling you about the type of hops they put in there, what they did for their fermentation side, and they're educating you a little bit. And that's what I think people love about the craft beer, is that no one really cared about or knew about craft beer 15 years ago, like 2005, 2006. Like there was people doing it, but then once you got this education, this huge thing, like everyone just became involved. Like breweries were packed, people loved it because they felt like they were part of the process. They get to see where the coffee or the beer is being made. They got to talk to the coffee tenders or the brewers. They get to talk to the sommelier or the vineyard person that runs everything. So they got brought into it, and I think that is such a huge draw for people that we're kind of sick of transactions. Like we want experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we want to be involved.
So there's layers to the development of the product, which lead to levels within the business. How did you ultimately become a connoisseur around where to source your coffee, where to get the best beans, the variants in beans, the symbology associated with the location of where the beans are from, and then the ideation and the labeling and the naming of each one of your various types of coffees?
That was just super fun for me, because I got to travel for the military, but a lot of the time was like to the Middle East, not the best vacation destinations. Coffee is grown around the equator, some very amazing countryside, and you get to work with people who are busting their ass to produce the coffee and get it to us. And so for me, it was super cool to go to the origin, show people where their coffee's coming from, and work with the farmers and see like, hey, how can we help support you? Because we want you to continue to be able to do work and buy from you in the future. I
just love that around the entrepreneurial dream, which is not just how do I grow, evolve, and funnel my creativity to positively impact the world, but it's also how do I support other people monetarily and keep them going and supporting their families too? That's just such a domino effect of impact, really.
Well, there's so many things involved. Like no one really works in a vacuum. Like nothing happens in a vacuum anymore. So there's so many things that are interconnected that like, yes, like we have coffee farmers that we work with down in Peru, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, all over the world. And then they have families to take care of. And then there's importers that they have to work. Then there's shipping companies. And then there's this. And like you look at like, that's what I loved about like how connected it was. And you really see like coffee is a worldwide beverage. It is consumed. The world literally runs off coffee.
Is it the highest traded commodity?
Behind oil, second.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Did you know that when you were getting into it?
That's one that I learned out of it. Yeah. So it's definitely one of the top traded commodities on, I think the NASDAQ. And so it's really cool to see, but, so there's the commodity grade coffee, which is, I'd say a commodity. So we always go after specialty grade coffee, which is scored 80 and above on the coffee scale. And so it is definitely a step above. And then we also try to get certified organic as well. So those are two main things that we look for when we're trying to get coffee.
Can you define that a little bit, certified organic? I feel like sometimes these terms, funneled around by the USDA. I mean, we see it with beef, grass-fed versus grass-finished. What does USDA organic mean?
So going through is the farmers have to get certified. The farmers and the cooperative have to get certified organic as well. And so that means they're not using any unnatural pesticides. And that's what has to be all our natural ingredients to put onto the coffee itself and into the fertilizer and then into the plants itself. So there's no harmful pesticides that are getting used on the certified organic. And then we have to get certified organic on our end too as well and have our annual inspection and basically showing, hey, this is how we're taking in the coffee, this is how we're counting for it, this is how much we're using of it. So it's all kind of like a cycle of like we received 1,000 pounds of coffee and we used 1,000 pounds of it for organic and write it off. And then you have to have like all the certificates and basically show the transparency all the way going back to the origin of where the coffee came from and to where you used it, how you roasted it, when you roasted it, how much did you roast, where did you send this roasted coffee to, like which customer did it go to. And it's a very aggressive process.
It almost sounds overwhelming. How did you become so well versed in each one of these channels?
I think that's something for me where I love a challenge. And so like same thing with the military, like if I had to be the certified expert, I was going to know as much as I could about it. And so, our HACCP, which is our food safety program, we had to start from scratch. Our organic certification, we had to start from scratch. And so you have to learn all these things along the way and then, try to call the inspector and ask them a few questions here. Like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And so it's all learned throughout the process. Like you don't know 98% of the business you're getting into until you get into it. Like you think it's going to be simple. I just got to get this, do this, and then there's fine. Then you get payroll, then you get HR, then you get this, then you get that. And then you just get so many things thrown at you. And I think that's the best thing the military has ever given me is that like, hey, you're going to get thrown a lot of crap your way. Just move and shake. Stay flexible. It's going to be okay. So that's been the best skill that I've been able to take from the military because we get so many things thrown at us, collateral duties, primary duties, whatever. And, learn it to the best of your ability. And because that, at the end of the day, that's your job. That's what you're tasked with. So
For sure.
Do it to the best you can.
So managing the product is one element of management. But you alluded before, you've got 25 employees. Managing people is a whole new game.
Yep.
And so, obviously within some of the nuance and complexity that we just described, now there's different parts of your team that are now focused on each one of those assets. What is that process like, and how do you help inspire and motivate people to take ownership for each part of the business?
Definitely the biggest challenge is people, right? Everyone's got their own kind of motivations, their own drive. Everyone's an individual. And so to try to get them collectively to go towards what the common goal is, I mean, that's been the hardest thing to kind of shape and mold. But I think between the team that we have and like really diving into the brand, like what do we stand for? What are we doing? What are our core values? And reiterating that on a day-to-day basis. And then basically being empathetic for when something doesn't go right. You just work through them like, hey, how can we fix this? What do we need to do to fix it? So it's definitely the biggest challenge of being a business owner is continually building that sense of culture and sense of community inside your own team. Because again, like every day is a new day. Someday someone may wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Something may happen. We have equipment break all the time. And so it's just like, all right, well, cool. How are we going to solve this problem? So I think collectively there's a little bit of shared misery because like we're all in this together. And it has been a huge bond for the team for sure. And so we've done a lot with a little. And so kind of seeing how much we've been able to do with the team that we have has been awesome. And I think that kind of gives a little bit of sense of like, okay, this is what we can do. And everyone just kind of gets on board.
I love this vision, man. It's so cool because we saw the process, we saw the product development. Now we're hearing how the team's developed. And now you're shipping. Now you're in so many different stores, so many different locations around the country. What's that process like? And have there been rules and regulations of crossing state lines and different things associated with that arena?
Yeah, so the supply chain logistics side of the house is definitely interesting. Like, luckily, we have a little bit of background in that, but every distributor we use has different systems, different rules, different, you name it. So having to adapt to each one of those is always a challenge. New paperwork has to be filled out on like a regular basis. You have to do promotional events and all these things. So we had zero background in this field from the day we started. Like, I didn't know how to roast coffee, didn't know how to brew coffee, didn't know anything about it, and just through sheer determination, we're going to figure this out, and we're going to try to do it the best we can. And so that's been always been fun, is that when you have people around you that are willing to go to bat and basically fuck shit up, it's really fun to be around.
I love that, man. It's also super cool because every cup of coffee that I've had from Trident is always consistent. How do you ensure that the experience is the same, whether it's here or in another location?
We obviously try our best with, through our HACCP, through our organic certification. All those things come with a back end of, transparency, record keeping, consistency wise. So we have to do so many different types of tests internally, to test for ATP readings, to test for cleanliness, you name it. And so then we developed two things. One, our coffee roaster is super consistent. It's one of the best on the market. It will roast the coffee the same way every single time. So that to me was super important, because I know we had basically two ingredients to mess with. Then our water profile is very unique. We are on the tail end of the Colorado River. And so for those who drink San Diego tap water, no, it's not the best. We have to heavily treat it. And so we're like, hey, we can't use this with really great coffee because it's not that great of water. And so we said, screw it. We're going to filter it all out. So we do RO, and then we add minerals back in that complement, basically, it's weird to say, a certain beer profile for maltiness. Mm-hmm. And so that's the water that we use with the coffee.
Oh, interesting. So much attention to detail, man. Yeah. That's impressive. That's very, very cool. How many states are you guys in now?
26.
Man. That's impressive.
Yeah. So we just picked up another large distributor, which is great. It'll be awesome for us for a few of our customers and accounts around the U.S. But yeah, we're in 26 states and over 1,500 accounts in those 26 states.
Very cool. What are some of the local stores that you guys are in if people wanted to get access to Trident Coffee?
Yeah. So our website has a good list of those. We try to keep it as updated as possible. But Jimbo's, Lazy Acres, Fraser Farms, Valley Farms, a lot of the local independents. Sprouts is another big one that we're in, and then a bunch of great convenience stores and liquor stores around San Diego. So those are some of the best ones, but our website is normally as up to date as we can keep it for accounts that we're in.
Very cool. What are some of the different flavor profiles that you guys currently have that people can try?
So we have a couple different black coffees, just a straight nitro cold brew, and those are from Brazil. Then we have our Damn the Torpedoes, which is a really good organic coffee from Peru. Then we have our Calm Under Pressure, is a really good organic coffee from Indonesia. And so all those have unique flavor profiles within those. This one's like really dark, bold, and rich. Our Calm Under Pressure is a little more chocolatey and smooth, and then our Brazil is just like chocolate, caramel, nutty. That was our first, basically our obviously signature coffee for Trident. Mm-hmm. And that was a great story to connect with those guys down in Brazil. And then we have a couple different of our kind of MCTO coffees as well. So we have like a churro flavor. We have seasonal ones that we launch all the time. We have a vanilla, lavender, and then obviously we're coming out with pumpkin spice here for fall. So you just got to keep up with it.
I love the seasonal ones. That peanut butter one you guys launched last year was literally like a delicious protein shake.
That has been hands down one of the most customer requested ones. It's great. I didn't think peanut butter banana was going to be that much of a hit.
It came out so good, man.
But it just reminds you of like high school. After a workout, you had peanut butter banana protein shakes.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's just like very nostalgic.
Yeah, for sure. So with how busy you are, how do you create a little bit of separation for you time?
I've struggled with it a lot just because I kind of go all in. And so there's a point even too where I was like living at the shop for several months just because like I just was so into it. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that, and I just came to a realization a couple years ago, I was like, hey, this is a marathon. This isn't a sprint. You got to take care of the chassis that's running this whole system. And so over the last couple of years, you and I have dove into a lot of this, is trying to figure out, hey, how do I be the healthiest version of myself possible? So I have to be eating the right foods. I have to take care of myself. I have to work out. I have to move. I have to stop and meditate. I have to do some of these things. And it's always a work in progress because life comes at you fast for a lot of stuff, and I'm still learning. But I think the biggest thing is carving out time. Time blocking is something that I'm trying to get into, and it's really been helpful. Like, hey, here's my window for this. Here's my window for this. And then, things happen. Curveballs always happen. But at least gives you some sort of set schedule to dive into and kind of have some consistency going into it.
I love the various terminology that I hear around time management. For you, it's time blocking. For Jason Kalipa, when I spoke to him, it was the AMRAP mentality. I'm going to do as many rounds of this task in this time domain, and then I'm moving on. And I'm moving on to the next thing. And I think it's so healthy to do so because it practices so much presence. And I think in this world of, you're getting this notification, you're getting that call, somebody's calling your name over here, but then you have this next task. Like there's so much distraction.
Yeah.
How do you navigate some of the distraction, when there's so many people pulling at your time? How do you create boundaries and then also empower others to kind of be buffers for yourself? If there's a problem, they go to this person and this person first before they go straight to you.
And so again, that's all through communication and expectation management. So something from my phone that I've noticed is that, hey, it can be a very crazy distraction kind of first thing in the morning when I'm trying to get things set. So I have a nice little lockbox that I can use if I'm trying to do like a 30-minute window block of this or an hour block of that. Throw it in there, set the timer, lock it up, won't see it.
That's cool. So when it's locked, you can't even get physical access until
you could break it if you wanted to, but I mean, you have a real problem at that point.
Yeah, for real.
So
that's a great one for those of you listening.
It's been very, very helpful because again, it's one of those things where you don't need it.
Yeah.
And so just put it away.
I never heard the lockbox before. I've heard like a group of friends going out to eat and they put their phones in the middle. Whoever touches it pays the bill.
I mean, that's a great social conditioning one. But I mean, if you're trying to keep yourself accountable like that, it's $40 on Amazon, and just throw it in there, set a timer for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. Hit the button, locks it up, and then you're good.
I love that.
So that's been one because again, we are in this age of distraction with so many things. Like we talked about with Andrew and the dopamine hits, and like, oh, cool, I do this, and then you're just stuck in there. Then like 10, 15 minutes goes by, like, what the fuck did I just do for those 15 minutes? Like you lost time.
Totally.
And so as an entrepreneur, as somebody who wants to maximize it, it's like you really have to try to pull yourself out of that. Like that's maybe not important, unless you get a 911 call, a full-on emergency. Like you can handle that stuff later. But then setting up the expectation management and communication with your team, you're like, hey, let's solve this problem at this time. If it's a full-on emergency, come grab me. We'll go take care of it. But it's just then, like you said, empowering them to try to figure out, hey, what do you need from me so you could do your job effectively?
I think there's so many valuable lessons there. One thing that you've really taught me is, you've said it a few times, expectation management. And that's helped me create boundaries. Because previously it was like, yes, just being a yes man and then trying to figure all of it out all the time. And then it's 65, 70% in each one of those categories versus time blocking. And then, hey, I'm going to try to provide 90 to 110% on each one of these things.
You get drained with all those distractions, and the every time your body has to mind has to shift between tasks. Like you're using so much energy to shift between, all right, if I'm doing bookkeeping and then I have to switch to this or to operations or to sales or to that, it's like, all right, if I can just block that out, do what I need to get done, like you said, the AMRAP thing, and then just, all right, cool, done with that. All right, what's next? All right, I need to talk about sales and ops. Cool, talking to that, do that, then move on to the next thing. But like within 15 minutes, you're in all three of those realms. It's gonna be a hard time for you to focus and get things done.
What are your thoughts on the phrasing dopamine addiction? Right? Like there's so many elements of dopamine that we're pursuing. You look at scrolling on social media and it's like you clearly have to be aware of it, especially from the marketing end of your business. But then it's also something that it's like you yourself, but also those that you spend time with and your employees that you want to educate, motivate, and inspire. You don't want them to get sucked into that loophole. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I definitely struggle with it too, because again, I just get caught, right? And you just don't even realize it.
You can even relate that conversation into food and other things as well.
I think for me, I think the biggest one that challenges people right now is social media, because you have such great access and power with your phone. That's, it's so capable. It's such an amazing machine. But then you realize, hey, what value are you getting out of it, right? I know you're absorbing content. Like for me, I love absorbing information. I love watching podcasts. I love Googling stuff. I love YouTubing everything. And so, but at the same time, it's like, all right, is the information and content that I'm gathering from 15 minutes of scrolling Instagram, what benefit is it providing me, vice if I was to sit down and watch like a 50-minute podcast or X, Y, and Z. So I think for me, if I'm using that tool for social media to engage and communicate with people, if I'm on it for 15 minutes, I better leave 15 comments or 15 likes or something where I'm engaging with the person I want to instead of just randomly
that's cool.
scrolling.
You set a metric for yourself. I like that.
I think it's important because again, at the end of the day, if that wastes 30 minutes to an hour of your time every single day, and there's no tangible benefit for you besides just visually seeing something, but your brain's not shutting off. Like there's no downtime from that.
Yeah.
It's very overly stimulating.
Yeah, I think those are some really cool feedback pieces as to how to utilize that as a tool so it doesn't overload your life. You're such a great information gatherer. What are some of the books that have really, really helped you, or what are some of the podcasts and places that you lean into to gather information?
It depends on the topic, obviously, but there's so many great podcasts out there for health and wellness side. Like you and I discuss them like on a regular basis. But some of the core ones I was able to gift to you was The War of Art. That one I read in college, and I absolutely fell in love with what Stephen Pressfield was talking about. If you're a creative, you have this muse, right? And the muse is always trying to express itself and come to life. The resistance, aka the phone, social media, all that stuff, the resistance is there to stop that muse from singing. And you have that struggle as an artist to let the muse come out and provide its greatness, and that's kind of like where I see the potential is. And you have bouts of it where it's able to express itself, but that resistance is doing everything it can to prevent that. And so you have to challenge and battle that every single day.
And something
that's
you and I have
fun
discussed around resistance is integrating some sort of disruption into your life. A positive disruption. And, we've connected around sauna and ice bath, depth in conversation. Most recently, we've seen the rise in conversations around ayahuasca and psychedelics and different things that can be a gentle disruption to help unlock certain levels within your brain, help military personnel with PTSD. As I kind of gently label some of these things, what's kind of coming to your brain?
Well, I think it's funny. So you go to MAPS, I forget their exact acronym, but it's basically studying psychedelics. What I love their analogy is that, hey, you have, you're a snowboarder. You have this nice mountain of snow, and you start carving out one path, from A to B, A to B, A to B. And that's your pathway. You're going to take it every single time. That may not be the best pathway to take, but unfortunately, that's the path you've gone, so that's the path you're always going to take. Vice when there's like fresh snow, you don't know what path to take.
Yeah,
You're free
the
to carve
neurons
it.
get fixed.
Yeah, I think the neural pathway thing is very interesting to figure out, hey, how do we respond? Because a lot of that is just ingrained, right? Your body creates a pattern, and it's going to go down that way, and it could be very, very detrimental to you. And we're seeing that a lot with, people who struggle with communication from PTSD, with opening up and being vulnerable because they've shut themselves off. They react this way, and that's the only way they know how to react. And so it just, your relationships suffer. It's not a good way. And so I think the psychedelic aspect can be very, very interesting if it can help create new pathways and show a new perspective on how to solve problems. I think that's a great thing.
For sure. And there's so many people coming out talking about the benefits. I mean, most recently, Aaron Rodgers spoke a little bit on a podcast about how that led to his MVP seasons. He spoke on the Aubrey Marcus podcast about that, and I listened to that extensively just to kind of hear the rhyme, the reason, and the rhythm. And it was really cool to hear because so often in our world, the world psychedelic creates this oh my gosh, that's drugs, that's a party drug. And there's this label, but then why are we not discussing Oxy and Vicodin and some of these pain management things that are highly addictive, but also come with pages? I mean, you think the tax book is big. I mean, pages and pages of side effects. And I think, there are potential side effects with, psychedelics, but when put in the right atmosphere, the right environment, the right people, I've heard really good success recently from a wide array of high performers.
Well, it's interesting. We go back to that conversation of Western medicine versus more naturopathic Eastern style medicine. Is that they both come to the table. I think Western medicine, if I break my arm, I don't want a shaman blessing my arm. I want to go to the ER, have them fix it back up and have it heal. And so I think there's a thing, but it's again, once that arm is healed, I don't want to be on Oxy or any sort of pain management for 2 months, right? So it's finding that balance between acute injury, healing, and then long-term, how are we, if these things have been done for thousands of years. The shamanistic culture is very, very interesting to see. And you hear of, because again, unfortunately, I was on Prozac for about a month trying to like treat some symptoms. And I was like, I just felt like a fucking zombie. Like it was terrible. Like I didn't feel anything. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to do anything. I was just like floating through life, and I didn't feel like myself. I felt like a shadow of myself. And so, try to figure out, hey, what can I control? What can I do? How can I fix it? So I really started with like, hey, it might be this gut brain connection piece. So I got to really watch what I eat and make sure my gut flora is good. Make sure my hormones are in balance. That's another big thing. So you start picking these things apart, and then, but if you dive into the space of psychedelics, I think like the research has been coming out. It's been very, very positive, especially for people who are struggling with anxiety, PTSD, depression, things of that nature. And so, we was able to go down with his partner Derek, and we did an ayahuasca experience down in Peru. Probably one of the most profound experiences of my entire life. Like, it's so hard to explain that feeling, but it's like I felt so loved and so taken care of in that time that none of the other BS mattered. And so for me, it was like, okay, if that's how, potentially you're supposed to feel from time to time, it's like, oh man, this is just great. Like it was so amazing. And I think more people should be looking into the opportunity to experience that instead of potentially going down the route of maybe SSRIs that can help in a short term, but we need to address the root issue, not just mask the pain. I think masking the pain through any sort of prescription drug is not the best long-term solution for anybody.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the mental imagery that I'm seeing is putting a picture over a hole in the wall. It doesn't really fix the hole.
No.
And the other imagery that you created is, going through a psychedelic experience, it almost blurs out all the noise. And then, certain things like love and connection and joy and why you're doing what you're doing. It's almost like the big rocks in your jar of life almost come to the forefront of your brain, as opposed to the sand that, is very prevalent and is the dopamine typically.
No, yeah, it's just from a perspective shift, that has been by far the most profound experience I've been able to have to figure things out. And my relations have changed quite drastically since that. And you can talk to my business partner and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, you're definitely different. And I think it's for the better, right? It's being more empathetic, more patient, more kind, and it's still a work in progress, but it's still way better than dealing with all that stuff of 35, 36 years of figuring stuff out. I didn't carve the best pathways down that slope, and so there were some really bad habits that were created that were reacted out of, honestly, like my fight or flight. Like I'm going to live, so I'm going to react, but it's not the best way to do it. And I didn't need to react in that way. So I think just that perspective shift of really balancing to the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system is huge, because if we're on that thing all day, we're always engaged, always on. You don't get that rest, and
I love that you mentioned the nervous system, man. We're in a world of like go, 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 always be available, more is better. But we need that rest and digest to complement the fight or flight. And I think it's so incredibly important, especially in how those impact, as you mentioned, relationships. Because we don't go to our grave with titles. We don't go to our grave with monetary compensation. We go to our grave with memories. And most of those memories are engaged in relationships. And I think it's really important to note that specialness that you created with yourself. At what point were you able to surrender to the point of, hey, these other things aren't working.
Yeah.
I need to try something new. And how did you then take the next step, which is vocalizing your experiences and how they've positively impacted your life?
Well, I think so. The funny thing is, I think it was probably 2 years ago. I was like, okay, I got 6 months left, and then the wheels are coming off, and Lord knows what's going to happen from here. So it's like, what do I want to do? Do I want to go out in blaze of glory? Do I want to make sure I can last and have sustainability and be there for everybody? And so that was the start of making habit changes for what can I control. So I can work out, I can eat certain things, I can move, I can do all these other things that I can control specifically. And then it was experimentation, because like I said, I've tried the prescription drug route. Did not work for me. Was not my jam. I didn't feel great on it. So I was like, I'll experiment some other opportunities. But then, you get to the point where I've lost more friends to suicide than I have to war. And at that point, you're like,
man, that made me gasp for a second hearing that out loud.
So it's just like one of those things like, okay, one, do we have so much ego that we can't share our experiences and talk? Because that's definitely a huge issue for guys to have that vulnerability, especially for talking to people that we don't know or may not trust. So like I have my best phone calls with, guys I served with, like joking around, having good conversations, and just like that's like kind of our therapy. But if you don't have that, especially when you transition from the military to being a veteran status, normally with your active duty, you're around your core group of guys, like core group all the time. Like you're in the same unit, you hang out together all the time. When you transition, like say you move away, like you don't have that support structure anymore. So who do you talk to? A lot of people are scared to talk about it because, they want to be seen as weak or they don't want to do that. And so it's like, okay, well, at a certain point, like after, how many buddies I've seen take their lives, like it's not worth it anymore. Like I need to figure something out because I don't want to, like I have so many great things I want to do. So many things if I let it go or something happens, like that's not how I want it to be. So it was just having that realization, that talk is like, okay, it's not a beautiful picture right now, but it's okay. It's, ebb and flows. It's the tide of life. It happens. You get depressed, you get serious things that go wrong, but it's, I think it was just, I forget the exact quote. It was like, inside there's like a really dark winter, but I know there's an invincible summer inside of me as well. So it's like, no matter how dark it gets, there's always this brightness. There's always this greatness that can come out. And sometimes it's just super hard to see.
Yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
to be able to talk to people, get some of these different experiences, that can really help.
Yeah, that's the way you describe that is beautiful. I also can't help but lean into the concept of feeling. And what I mean by that is your arm hurts or you got a headache. What do people say? Oh, take an Advil. Well, maybe you're supposed to feel that. Maybe you're depleted of salt. Maybe you're sleep deprived. Maybe you've been getting too much blue light. Maybe you've had too much caffeine or dehydrated. Maybe there's too much acoustic stimulus. And I think there's something to be felt by this ayahuasca experience where you're just in it. You're not trying to run from it. You're just in that moment. And, whether that's a panorama view of different memories within your life, the deconstruction of traumas, the seeking to understand why you reacted to certain things the way you did, or vice versa. I think there's power and to talk about Kobe again, he's like, the good things, they go. The bad things, they go. But as long as you know that things are going to come and they're going to go, you can practice stillness. And, I mean, you can hear the calmness in my voice when I say that, and I can't help but relate that to the ice bath and why I love it so much, where it's like, I'm anxious, I'm panicky for the first 45 seconds, but this feeling's going to go. I'm going to get this norepinephrine dump. I'm going to get maybe an emotional reaction or a better connection with those that I get to engage with this on. But it just is such a great metaphor for life of like things are going to come, they're going to go, but I need to feel this. And a lot of life right now is like, don't feel that. Let's distract, let's deflect, whether that's alcohol or that's marijuana or whether that's the reliance on external factors. And what I love about what you're doing is you're taking coffee and allowing people to feel with somebody else. This unique human connection, and that is what it means to be more human, in my opinion. What do you think about this ideology around feeling?
Well, it's one of those weird things where some of the best memories I've had were actually, joking with buddies in the military about something I probably shouldn't have joked about, but like that innate sense of dark humor is how you're able to bond and connect. And so those, like once you have those bonds, like they don't go away. Like I can not see one of my friends for 5-10 years, and then comes back in my life, we just pick it up just like that.
I love that you can just pick up right where you left off, because sometimes with this mechanical box in our pocket, it's like, hey, why didn't you text me back?
Yeah.
It's like, no, the best relationships are like, oh yeah, life got busy, you got buried in my text chain, I got back to you 6 months later, and I'm still laughing about what you texted me.
No, that's it. Because as I said, unfortunately, if you're the social media side of it, it's starting to get a little bit better, but it's normally like somebody's highlight reel, right? So you're talking about seasons. If all you're seeing is the up and you're not necessarily seeing what's down, is like you think something's wrong with you. It's like, well, I mean, I'm not in the best place right now. Like that's okay. There's seasons to this thing. There's ups and downs. It's a roller coaster for sure. And so that's the only downside I think with that, is that it's conditioning people to only see the highlight side of the house, right? You're only posting your PRs. You're only doing this. You're only doing that. And so when people scroll through their, 5,000, 10,000 followers, whatever they do, all they see is highlight reels. They're like, oh shit, like maybe I'm not doing well. Maybe I'm
Am
not.
I good enough? Do I have imposter syndrome? Where
Yeah.
where do I fall in the landscape?
And so
And
I
then
think
there's comparison.
the comparison piece, I think, is the worst aspect of what social media does. And so if you can, like you said, stop, be still, knowing that there is evolution, but there's seasons, there's tides, there's you look at Mother Nature like that just doesn't stay still, always changing, and that's okay. Like that's part of it. But I think it's just finding time to look in that and reflect on it, and not have to worry about like go, hustle, because again, it's not sustainable.
For sure. Another thing that I really think about within this conversation is this element of listening. Listening is not just the words that are spoken. That's hearing, in my opinion. If you're feeling anxious, you're feeling depressed, try to listen to that whisper. Seek the root cause of that. And like you mentioned with habits, what are the habits that maybe led to that? If I wasn't feeling that previously and I'm feeling that now, what took place between those two things? What was in the black box between input and output as you described? And listening is such a beautiful art, right? Because it's observing body language, it's seeing the contrast of facial expressions, it's seeing how do they lean in, do they lean away? And I think there's a uniqueness to that because you could apply that to business, right? Like what is the consumer saying about the product? What is the employee saying about our conversation and my leadership style? The word listen is a very powerful word in our world. And I think you can unpack that to so many different levels. What do you think about when I say listen?
I think people go back to just hearing, the understanding piece. So if you're talking listening in that context, it is the understanding piece, right? Is trying to put yourself in that other person's perspective, because that is what empathy is, feeling what somebody else is feeling. I think it's very challenging right now for a lot of people. We're in our own little bubble. It is hard for us to kind of break out of that. There's been so much anxiety, so much unknown for the past several years that, people maybe not be acting out of the most abundant mindset. They might be acting a little bit of scarcity, And so that, I think, it definitely creates barriers to listening, understanding, and actually hearing what somebody has to present to themselves. So I think it's, finding that time to be there, be present with them, and really try to understand them.
Yeah, for sure. If I'm listening to the current trajectory of Trident Coffee, I'm anticipating in the next few years a pretty big boom in a positive way. What do you think comes next for Trident? It's constant connection. The products continue to develop. The team starts to get a little bit bigger. You're now across, I think you said 26 states. Like, what's to come next for you and this incredible brand that has developed so fast, man?
Well, I think it's just doing what we do. Like if you've got something that you're doing well, continue to do that, but always look for ways to do it better. But at the same time, it's like being organic with what we're offering. We have this really unique concept where no one else is doing it. It provides a really cool brand to people that are just used to getting a dark roast coffee or a light roast or a mocha with this. And so adding that, layers to it, as people become more familiar with it and they start telling their friends, like that organic growth is something really exciting for us. But we just want to keep doing what we're doing in a way with connecting with people like yourself, because it's so fun. Like if we're doing this and we're not having fun, we're messing up big time.
Totally.
We have such an opportunity here to be and hang around with amazing people, because a lot of people love coffee, and we can be that for those people and then connect with them, engage with them, listen to them, hear their story, and build an amazing brand that people love because they feel it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's the biggest thing, is that if you can create that emotional connection, you have those super fans, and that's something that we want to bring. Like, we're trying to build this tribe out, so they're speaking our language, they're doing, they're active, they're thinking about the stories, they're thinking about all the lessons that we have to take. With Weather the Storm is a perfect example. The coffee itself comes from the Malabar coast in India that suffers monsoon season. So the coffee itself has to weather the storm to get through the harvest season. And then for us, that's just life too, right? There's sometimes there's stuff that gets thrown your way that is just going to bring you to your fucking knees.
Yeah, it is.
It's okay. So whether that storm gets through, the sun's going to shine on that the next day or two. And so it's very challenging for sometimes when, again, you see the highlights, you don't see what humans go through on a day-to-day basis, which is a lot of ups and downs. like I said, like last 2 weeks, we've had so much equipment break and you're always trying to fix it, go through there. So it's like, okay, just weather the storm, weather the storm. And so it's just like a mantra at our shop because again, if you don't, like you're going to fade away and die? Like that's not the option. Endure.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I just finished Cameron Haynes' book around Endure.
okay.
Super cool. If you haven't checked it out, this is a gentleman that runs a marathon every day. Still has a 9-to-5 job. He's like the hardest motherfucker on the planet with David Goggins. They go back and forth. Rogan talks about those guys all the time. But the other thing that's super cool about this concept of endure is in order to grow, in order to evolve, you got to continue to enhance capital. And you've built some really amazing relationships with people. One of them I was fortunate to have on the show, Dante Whitner. And, everybody that I talk to they speak volumes of Trident Coffee. And they're so positive in their impact and their connection with you and the brand. What does it mean to you to continue to build these relationships and enhance capital so that way you guys can continue to grow on a monetary component?
Well, it's funny. It goes back to when you focus on what you have in commonality with a lot of people. Like I don't like Dante and I have anything in common besides NFL player. He's done amazing stuff on the field, but now he's transitioned. Now he's working with athletes off the field to make sure that they're financially set up for success. And so when you think about, us coming together, it's like, yeah, he's probably had struggles and headaches with, TBIs, concussions, maybe bouts of depression, who knows? But he gets up, he works his ass off every day in the gym. He does what he can, he controls what he can control, and he's helping others. So it's not just about him anymore. He's like, okay, this is what I went through. May not have been the best situation for me, but I'm going to fix that for the next generation because I want people to be better off than what I had it. I want to leave it in a better place.
Leaders out there, like the best leaders, man, typically give what they wish they had in that moment in time. And Dante's helping others. So are you. Dante's incredibly health conscious. So are you. He's seeking edges within, ingredients and supplements. He just, came out with that Nirvana water with my H&B. And, that's shown great research with delayed onset muscle soreness, with, some sort of catabolic effect as you start getting older and the muscle quality. These are all things that you're interested in as well. And so the fact that there's collaboration with like-minded individuals, it's like, oh, we thought we were, a business owner and a military guy and a professional football player, but it's actually like, nope, here's that middle ground as you described previously with, being deployed and connecting with these other cultures around coffee.
Yeah. It's funny. So Dante and I always send messages back and forth. Like if I post something or I see him post something, we'll comment on it real fast. So he was very interested in the trip to Peru and wanted to know a little bit more. But it's funny when you can see others trying something new, it might give you the permission to do it as well. So I think that's what I love about podcasts and what you're doing is that you're interviewing these amazing people and they're just telling their story, right? That's all you're doing is talk with them. Like, hey, what was it like to be a games athlete, to do this, do that. And it just kind of gives other people permission, like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it, right? And so I think that's super powerful, empowering for others to know it's like, hey, like I said, if you're stuck maybe, right, you have just that little thing, but if you hear somebody, talk to somebody, it might just push you over that edge to get things rolling, like work out, eat right, whatever is needed. And so that's what I think is amazing about what's the best part about social media is sharing information. And if it's done the right way, and what Invictus Mindset's doing is amazing.
Well, we appreciate your support. And at the end of the day, it's granting people permission to be unapologetically themselves. And, if we can do that and share a little bit of cool storytelling and create a safe space to people to be reminded of elements of their journey that maybe they didn't remember, maybe is not in the replay of the currentness of their story. They're like, oh, yeah, I did do that thing. And all of a sudden, there's like this little aha moment that catapults him into, that next level. It's a very cool thing. And, storytelling, listening, and the mantras that you mentioned, man, it was such a pleasure and an honor to officially record one of our epic conversations.
First of many.
For sure. If you could leave our audience with, a tool, a trick of the trade, a little piece of advice, what would you like to share?
I'd say control what you can control. Find out if there's gaps in what you currently want. Figure out ways you can implement things. So for me, the first thing I had to do was food, sleep, and movement. If I could control those three things, I know I'd feel a lot better. And so that is one big thing is that, hey, if you focus on that, you're winning.
Yeah, for sure. Food, sleep, and movement. There you heard it, guys, from the founder and CEO of Trident Coffee. Where can people find you, Eric?
Social media is just a great way to connect. LinkedIn, Eric Johnson on LinkedIn, Trident Coffee Roasters, and then social media for Instagram, just Craft Your Legacy.
I love it, man. Guys, thank you so much for embarking on this adventure with Eric Johnson today. If you enjoyed our conversation, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Till next time, guys.
Are you over 35 and in need of a solid training program? Are you looking to improve your athleticism and keep up with the younger athletes in your CrossFit gym? Then look no further than our Invictus Masters program. This program places year-round emphasis on mobility and stability exercises with movements that we have seen directly benefit our Masters athletes. Our program is led by Nicole DeHart and offers a training program designed specifically for Masters athletes who are looking to compete at a higher level in the sport of CrossFit. Some of our top Masters athletes in the world train with us, including CrossFit Games champion Kevin Kester, Matt Beals, and Pat Sprague. You can learn more about their stories and the Invictus Masters program by checking out their episodes right here on the Invictus Mindset Podcast. If you'd like more information about the current training cycle or to join the Invictus Masters program, please email Nicole at invictusathlete.com. That's NICHOLE at invictusathlete.com. Breathing, movement, circulation, digestion. What do all these body functions have in common? Our muscles. There are over 600 muscles in the human body that are responsible for supporting our daily activities. That's why your muscle health is incredibly important. On this podcast, I always discuss seeking our peak expression and striving to maximize our human potential. And so I try to share with you the top products that I find on the market. My H&B is a clinically proven ingredient that has been shown to help build and maintain lean muscle mass, increase strength, improve recovery, and enhance body composition. Learn more about your muscle health at myhmb.com/Invictus. Once again, that's myhmb.com/Invictus. Enhance your muscle health and enhance your life.